Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. In this week's episode, I shall be looking at Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. Now, it was published in 2011 and it was then made into a film in 2016. Now, I will be looking at four things. I'll be looking at the plot, I'll be looking at if I recommend the film, if I recommend the book, and overall, how well did the film take from the book. So, let's start with the plot. The film starts with Jacob getting a call from work, getting a call at work, and getting a co-worker to drop him off because the call is about his granddad. In the book, he's trying to get fired from this job. He then gets a call from his granddad, gets his friend to drop him off. Little differences, but we'll see. So in both, he goes into the woods. So he arrives at his granddad's place, realises that the place has been ransacked, then goes off to find his granddad, goes off into the woods and finds his granddad. Now in the book, he's completely ravaged, like slashes across his chest and everything. In the film, his eyes are missing. That's literally the only thing. But in both, Jacob sees this thing that he believes has killed his granddad, and then ends up going into therapy. Now in the book, there is a lot more of the aftermath of that, certainly, whereas in the film it's almost immediate that he goes into therapy. Then you get the therapy, which he then goes through. As I said, in the book you've got, he sort of loses touch with his friends. He finally manages to get rid of work. He is at a birthday party and he's got these haunting last words from his granddad in the back of his head, and he gets given a present from his granddad that he opens in front of everybody, and it's a book, and in the back of that is a letter that tells him about the orphanage and the stories that he's been hearing since his childhood. In the film, he gets given this present later, and he opens it up and gets a postcard and sees that it's about the orphanage of and the tales that he's been told by his granddad from his childhood. So this kind of kickstarts in both his want to go and find out more about this orphanage that his granddad grew up in. So he then goes off and he asks for permission, and the therapist goes, that's a great idea, we'll send him off, that's absolutely great. So he does so, and that sort of does happen in both. Now in the film, we see Jacob's childhood in little bits and bobs. We don't see that much of it, but we see sort of like pictures that he's showing and things like that, just to sort of give the fact that he is, he's being told these stories from his granddad about these magical people and what they could do about this childhood and this home that he grew up in. In the book, we get like whole chapters about it and how as he grows up, he realizes that this might be false and his granddad might not have been telling him the truth. So as I said, in both, Dr. Golan is the one that finally convinces his parents to let him go to Wales, where the children's home is. But his father is accompanying him, because obviously he can't go on his own. Now, the approach of the island is very different in both. So in the book, it's shrouded in mist, and you come across the ship's graveyard. It's got sort of like this unholiness to it. You're pulling in, you finally see these cliffs rearing out of nowhere. Whereas in the film, it's a sunny day, they're coming in to land, a peregrine is flying overhead, Jacob like laughingly goes, "Hi, Miss Peregrine, I'm Abe's grandson, I'm here to meet you," and it goes on like that. Now, I prefer the approach to the island in the book, because I feel like obviously if you're going to deal with people and children with supernatural powers and monsters and things like that, you want this sort of like eeriness to it, rather than in the film blue skies, perfect water. You don't really see much else of that. Now, when they get to the island, in the book they settle in, they go on a scout together to have a look at the island, but then Jacob's dad gets distracted with the birds, so Jacob just goes off and does his own thing. So he goes off to try and find someone as well to take him to this children's home, which he does. He gets a lad about his age to do so, and he takes him to the marsh, and then he just sort of leaves him on the edge, and then Jacob goes the rest of the way on his own. Now, in the film, his dad full on comes out and pays a child to take him to the old abandoned house. Again, annoyed me a little bit, but it's fine. Now, The first look at the house is the same. It's decrepit, it's abandoned, part of it's blown up. In the book, after exploring and finding nothing, he then goes back to the pub. But in the film, the first exploration of the house is how he meets the children. And the children take him to Miss Peregrine's home through the time loop straight away. So there's no build up or anything. He literally goes to the house, finds the children, follows the children, goes to Miss Peregrine's home. So in the book, Jacob then goes on another exploring mission. But this time he's sort of like exploring the town, and he ends up at a history exhibit. And he ends up in a history exhibit in a church where he meets Martin. And Martin is the one that tells him a bit of a history of the island. And then introduces him to his great uncle Oggy, who knows more about the island and the history behind it, and might have even known Abe when he was a child there. So Jacob then finds out that a bomb dropped on the children's home on September 3rd, 1940. So he's now a bit depressed because he's thinking, oh, you know, I'm supposed to have been finding out all about this children's home, and everybody's been dead and gone for however many years. So in the film, the first time that Jacob goes through the time loop, he runs away and ends up on a pub on September 3rd, 1943, which is 3 completely different years to the book. I don't know why they did it. It made no sense to change that whatsoever, but that's fine. And he almost gets arrested for being a spy, but then gets saved by the children, who seem to accept him straight away and are sort of like, it can happen to the best of us, and so on. Now, in the book, when Jacob almost gives up because he believes the children all died in 1940, a peregrine falcon comes into his room and drops a feather, which urges him to explore yet again. So you're getting this intrigue sort of building up within the book. So he then goes back to the house in the book, and he sees a trunk, which he finally manages to break open, and in it he finds loads more pictures of peculiar children. So invisibility and people that can float and fire in the hand and little people in bottles and things like that. But while he's looking at the photos, he's then discovered by the actual children that have come back through the time loop, who flee from him and run through the bog. And so he then follows and ends up through the cairn, I think it's called, and into the time loop. Now in this again, he does head back to the pub like he did in the film, and he almost ends up being strung up for being a spy again, but he slips away to then be captured at knife point by Emma. Now Emma in the book has fire, okay? So Emma and Millard, now Millard is the invisible boy, get Jacob and take him to Miss Peregrine, but Emma is still quite wary of who he is and, you know, is not very trustful. Now in the film, for some unknown reason, I still don't understand why they did it, Emma can't manipulate fire, she manipulates air. In the film, she manipulates air. They changed it for no apparent reason whatsoever. I really don't get it. It annoyed me. It annoyed me to no end when I found out. So in both, he meets Miss Peregrine, and she gives him some information about what they are and what it all is. So for example, they're peculiar children. We've created this time loop so they can survive and not be ridiculed, and so on and so forth. Now in both, he does stay for supper, and he then gets a little bit more insight into what each child can do. So some have prophetic dreams, some have like a carnivorous mouth at the back of their neck, and so on and so forth. And in both, he sees the bomb descend, but Miss Peregrine reset the loop. Now after that, he goes back to his own time, and in the book, his dad tries to make sure that Jacob stays with him the next day, but eventually bows to Dr. Golan's advice and lets him go off on his own and exploring. In the film, he pretty much orders Jacob to stay with him 24/7 and doesn't let him out of his sight. So he then ends up returning to the children's home, and in the film, it's just to explore some more. In the book, it's when he finally gets shown what each individual child can do, and then he ends up becoming friends with Emma and sort of falling a little bit for her. So in the book, they have a big lunch, and then they go through town to go do some swimming. So, you know, Jacob and a few others. In the film, Emma, I'm going to call her, takes Jacob to her underground ship after everyone has gone for a walk. So Emma has now started a relationship with Jacob in the film, whereas book Emma so far is still sort of a little bit wary, but starting to warm up to him. So in both, Jacob then returns to his own timeline again, but is accused of killing some sheep. Now, his dad reacts in the film by wanting to cancel the trip and stick by Jacob's side 24/7 and thinks that, there's something wrong. In the book, he's more supportive and just asks if Jacob is okay. Did he have anything about this? Did he know anything about this? And then sticks up for not only Jacob, but the other boy that's been accused of killing the sheep. So in both, Jacob and Emma do start to appear to start something, which is weird because Emma is Abe's, who's Jacob's granddad's old girlfriend. Don't know how I'd feel about that. Now we now encounter Enoch. Now in the book, he's on the lawn with his animated little clay soldiers who are fighting. He seems younger and more impulsive in the book than he does in the film. In the film, he's in a dingy attic, and he then brings some weird doll-style creatures that he's created to life to fight each other. And he seems older and much more aggressive towards Jacob. And he's much more aggressive towards Jacob's affections for Emma as well. So his gift is reanimation. So he can take a heart, put it in a dead thing and bring it back to life, or create life from clay as long as he's got a heart. Now, Enoch in both takes pleasure in showing Jacob Victor, who is dead. So in the film, Enoch brings him back to life and scares Jacob, but Jacob noticed that Victor died in the exact same way that his granddad did. Eyes missing. In the book, Jacob sees Victor, but he's just dead. There's no similarities to his dead granddad, and there's no coming back to life with the help of Enoch. So in both, you now get the appearance of a bird watcher. Now in the film, Jacob and his dad actually take to him, start talking to him, and then Jacob's dad gets a little bit more, depressed about the fact that this other guy has come and spotted these birds or whatever. But in the book, Jacob only really sees him from afar as his dad points him out to him in a pub after being dejected about not being able to be the only one discovering these birds. So that's sort of like, you're then thinking, oh, new guy to the island, don't trust him. You'd be right. So Emma in the book, takes Jacob away somewhere so they can discuss what is going on. Now, in the film, it's happened a while back, and then Air Emma is film Emma, and Fire Emma is book Emma. So Air Emma also shows him this big monster that comes up onto the shore. Miss Peregrine shoots it, kills it, and then she turns around and goes, "You can see the monsters," and that's when he realizes he's special. So in the book, Fire Emma takes him to a sunken ship at night, goes down underneath, shows him like all these glittering fish, really cute little romantic scene, which I would have loved to see, to be perfectly honest, but we never got that, did we? So she then starts telling him about hollows. Now, hollows can kill peculiars. Now, in the book, just Emma tells him, and he tells her then of the dead sheep, and then she just realises that, hang a minute, something's not right. In the film, this revelation comes earlier, and there's also a scrapbook with pictures of what happens to dead peculiar children. I never understood that, to be perfectly honest, but whatever floats your boats. And then it also has a history of who the Hollows were, and the fact that they are evil peculiars trying to get an eternal life by using Imbrines, I think they're called, who are people like Miss Peregrine who can manipulate time to try and get eternal life even. External life. So you've got that sort of history now, you kind of have an idea. You then find out later on in the book that these evil peculiars were actually Miss Peregrine's brothers that started it all. And they didn't use an Imbrine, they sort of like just tried to they used an empty time loop. So in both, you then get a fellow Imbrine, again, if I'm saying this wrong, I do apologise, who comes flying in with news of what is happening and the fact that her loop has been ransacked. Now, in the book, Jacob accompanies them and is included in all the discussions. In the film, they take the bird through the loop, but Jacob is kind of left on the outside and not allowed to pry about what happens. So, in the book, because he's included in this discussion, he ends up staying the night, and then only once, so his thing is, I need to be told all about the Hollows. And he finds out then the history of his granddad, the fact that his granddad went off to kill these things and was looking after them and everything from there. But then we find out about the renegade faction, who, as I said just previously, was Miss Peregrine's two brothers. So we then learn that information. So in the book, Jacob's dad ends up drinking a lot more. And so then Jacob is trying to decide whether or not to stay or go in regards to the children's home, because he knows the loop is going to have to close soon. You know, nobody's going to be able to leave. But then the home becomes a lockdown and it becomes very alert. So meanwhile, in the film at this point, Jacob has been taken at knife point by a white, who is, in the film, the Hollows who eat enough children to then become almost normal. In the book, they're slaves of the Hollows. I don't know. They just keep changing things for no apparent reason. So anyway, so Jacob has been taken knife point by a white, that then trades his life for Miss Peregrine's capture. Then leave all the children to the fate of Hollow. In the book, Martin turns up dead, and he's fished out of the sea, in which they suspect murder. Now, in the film, it's the old guy in the wheelchair, and he died before Jacob was taken hostage, because it was due to his death that he runs into the time loop, followed by the white. So in the book, Jacob brings the news of Martin's death to Miss Peregrine, who then puts them in a tighter lockdown. But then Emma, Enoch, Bronwyn, who's the strong girl, and Jacob devise a plan to bring back Martin and find out if there's something going on or not, whether or not it was an accident or whether or not he was killed by a Hollow. In the film at this point, I believe they're fighting off a Hollow, and they escape the house. The bomb that has been stopped from falling falls finally, and kills the Hollow, but also collapses the time loop. So then in the book, the four escape the house and enters Jacob's time stream. They wake Martin, who confirms that a Hollow did in fact kill him. Then they are, just as they're finishing up, a white then comes in, who knows who they are and have been hunting them for a while. It turns out he is Dr. Golan. I think this is kind of the same in the book as well, in the film as well. But it turns out he is Dr. Golan, and he's 4th grade teacher or whatever. He's like a shapeshifter or something. And you find out that he's been following Jacob his entire life. Now, in the book, they escape from the Hollow and then run back towards the time loop, but due to trips, both Emma and Jacob have to then try and lead the Hollow away from the other people, which they do, and then Jacob is able to then kill the Hollow. And this is when Jacob kills the Hollow, this is where he sort of gets his inner strength from, pretty much. It was a little bit of a pushover before, but now he's got his inner strength. But then Jacob and Emma now go after the white. So in the film, at this point, they've raised Air Emma's special ship to sail to Brighton and save Miss Peregrine. However, we go back to the book now. So in the book, when Jacob and Emma get back, Miss Peregrine and her friend have been kidnapped by the white. So Jacob, Emma, Millard and Bronwyn go after her to try and save her, because Millard, the invisible boy, followed him to know exactly where the white had taken Miss Peregrine and the fellow Imbrin. In the film at this point, they've reached Blackpool and come up with a plan to rescue the trapped Imbrins, which is successful. The loop closes in 2016. Jacob goes back to his grandfather, who is now suspiciously alive, and tells him everything that's happened. He then tries to get back to the time that Air Emma is in, so that they can be together, and it ends with the sunken ship sailing off into the sunset with Miss Peregrine looking over them. What a lovely ending for an appalling film. Actually, it's a horrible ending. So in the book, however, there is a confrontation, first between all 4 of the children and the white, where he shoots Millard, then between Fire Emma, Jacob and the white at the top of the lighthouse, where the white throws the birds over the side and into the water. Now, Jacob shoots the white as he tries to kill Fire Emma, and he ends up killing the white. Now, Fire Emma and Jacob go after the birds in the sea. A U-boat rises out of the sea and has captured one of the birds. However, Miss Peregrine has escaped and is rescued by Fire Emma. Now, at this point, they realise that the loop hasn't reset and Millard is bleeding out. So they go back to the house. They find it was partially blown up by the bomb that was normally stopped. They gather supplies, treat Millard, and Jacob and his friends even go and say goodbye to Jacob's dad. So Jacob's dad knows that, he's not going crazy. Jacob does have friends. They then sail off into the future with a map and a purpose to save everybody else. And that is how the book ends, setting it up perfectly for the other 2 books. Now, I believe that the film wanted it all in one film, just in case it wasn't successful, and had no thought of making it into a trilogy, because they finished the plot in one film. They pushed everything into one film, which made absolutely no sense. The book perfectly sets up for more adventures. The fact that they did keep some of the points, but did also completely change the storyline to fit one narrative, and the fact that they've randomly changed details like Fire Emma and Air Emma for no apparent reason. I am giving the plot a 3 out of 10. I was not impressed. Now, they had, so in regards to whether or not I would recommend the film, they had a great book series to make a film with a lovely premise. And yet somehow, in my eyes, they messed everything up. I don't know if this is because I've read the book before watching the film. Maybe I should have watched the film first. But I did not enjoy it. They switched characters for no apparent reason. They had like a whole conspiracy theory going on, which wasn't there in the book. It was sort of spread out over 3, and it wasn't like all within 2 minutes, you know, where they've gone to Brighton and saved the day. It made absolutely no sense. I was highly disappointed with what I was watching. I would never watch it again. And I would not recommend this film, to be perfectly honest. If you haven't read the book, you might enjoy this film. But if you have read the book, I wouldn't recommend the film. And if you're trying to choose between the film or the book, read the books. The books are far superior, far superior. So I'm going to give the film a 2 out of 10 for me. I just wouldn't recommend it. Now the book. Oh my God, the book. So this book was recommended to me by one of my multiple sisters, Jessica. So she recommended it to me, then slowly all 4 of us, me, Ree, Jess and Nikki, all ended up reading the book series. And we always, whenever we've got a book we love, we always share the love between all 4 of us. So we all end up reading a book if we really enjoy it, like Gone Girl, who will be a later episode in this series. And I had such confidence in this series because Jessica did recommend it, and I was not let down. It was fantastic. I bought all 3 at the same time, and I read all 3 within a couple of weeks. It was fantastic. Once you've read one, you had to read the other 2. You couldn't just leave it at one. Whereas some book series, you read one, you go, I can wait. And I adored every single book. And I adored the premise. I adored everything that they put into it and the narrative. And honestly, I would give this book, and in fact, not just this book, but all 3 books, a 10 out of 10. I would recommend reading this to anybody. It is a fantastic book series. Now, overall, the plot was almost completely different. They switched characters around, and they included plot points that made no sense. The time period is pretty much the same. However, the film narrative tried something on its own that I don't think worked completely, and they didn't take as much from the book as I would have hoped that they did. So it fell flat in my eyes, and so I'm going to give it overall a 3 out of 10, which I think is quite generous, to be perfectly honest. This is always my own opinion. If you do disagree with anything I've said, do leave it below in the comments. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to click subscribe so you're alerted whenever a new video is out. But join me next week for my contented narrative around Gone Girl, which is actually, yeah, next week's episode. So look at me thinking it was future down the line, but it's next week's episode. If there are any books or film adaptations you'd like, you just let me know and I will add it to my list, my ever-growing list. But until then, remember to always keep it contento.